so much. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic, and it's all Rob. And so where we're picking up today is on page 66. And yes, it's technically the second full paragraph, page 66, if we were to live. It's near the bottom of the page. Now, ideally, if I was doing a wonderful job of managing time, which never happens, we would have read and gone through this chapter last week, because it ties in so perfectly with what we wrapped up with. So just a little bit of summary. What we were talking about is why we need to get to this fourth column in our resentments, which is to say the need we have with which we need to be free of these resentments. You see, last week we were talking about any human being who holds on to a deep resentment. What it does is it ruins the time that they might have in their life, the freedom, the joy, the peace, the serenity, that it wastes that life. But for people like us, for people who have this illness, what it does is it blocks us from that connection that we need to a power greater than ourselves. The obsession returns and we drink again. And so we don't just need to be free because it sucks. We don't just need to be free because it's painful. We don't just need to be free because it's futile. We need to be free of resentments because our very lives depend on it. And so page 66, if we were to live. So it says if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. Now, it's not a technical must, so we don't need to open our windows. It's getting a little musty. But I will let you know, it is implied. You know, if I want to be free, if I want to stay alive, I need to be free of anger. It says the grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. Now, when we talk about the grouch and the brainstorm, Rob's got, that is adorable. When I was a kid, Oscar the Grouch was my favorite, which I think told me that I was going to have unhealthy relationships later in life. But Grouch is kind of self-explanatory. Oscar the Grouch, complaining, negative, in that place. But when we talk about the word brainstorm, its sort of modern definition is somebody that's like thinking about a whole lot of things. You know, like you get a request to join like a workplace meeting where it's like, we're going to brainstorm and synergy, and somebody call the HR department, you know, that's what we think of the word brainstorm. But the word brainstorm in the 1930s didn't have that same definition. Because one might think, what do you mean? Okay, being negative and living in that place of grouch, yeah, that makes sense that's not going to work for me. But brainstorm, that sounds like creative. Or if you're like me, it sounds like Paige went on another tangent and she's on the road to Ashtabula. Somebody's got to bring her back, you know. I'm just all over the place. But that's not what we mean by brainstorm. In the 1930s, the definition of the word brainstorm was a sudden explosion or outburst of anger. So not the analysis paralysis, the overthinking, which is not a pleasant place to live either, but that place of anger, that explosion of anger. So that's what we need to be free of. It says they may be the dubious luxury of normal men. So what it's saying is that non-alcoholics, yeah, they have the luxury of living in anger. They have the luxury of sitting in resentment. They have the luxury of that. But for us, that, and like, yes, as Rob put in the chat, dubious is questionable, where it's like, yeah, it won't kill them, but it's going to be painful. It's going to be unpleasant, you know? Oh, gosh. I wish this memory didn't come to mind just now. My very first ever sponsor, she was a character. She would describe it as like soiling your pants. You know, like at first it's warm, it's okay, but then it starts to get real uncomfortable. And again, I apologize for anyone that's eating. I really wish I didn't have that memory. But that's the idea. It's like, it's not going to kill you, but I'd rather avoid it. You know what I'm saying? So that's that metaphor. Yikes. But that, like, even people who are not going to die of that resentment, it's still not pleasant. It still ruins their lives and their relationships. But for us, it's complete, like, it is But it goes on to say, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. And if you've ever heard that expression, a resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That's exactly what it is. And how literal is that for people like us? Now, I know you well-adjusted alcoholics would never, but somebody like me, I would cop a resentment, just a little one. And you know what I would do? I would drink at them. You know what I'm saying? Oh, you harmed me? Well, let me show you. I will ruin my life. Lesson learned. That'll teach you, right? That drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And I'm drinking that poison until inevitably I take the poison that is that first drink. Again, because resentment cuts me off from this power that I need more than anything else. It goes on to say, we turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. So last week we went through and we discussed those first 3 columns. The first column, and actually I'll put it on the screen, do a little bit of review as we go, why not? So the first column, that first column is just going to be one name per page. So it is going to be the name of a person, or the name of an institution, or the name of a principal. And we do all of column 1. So it's name, flip the page, name, flip the page, name, flip the page, until we're done that. And then we go into column 2, which is why am I angry? And the key about this column is to be point form. To not get involved in story. I want to be petty. Oh, this is where we got to use those curse words. I want to be as petty as I really am, but I want to be point form. I don't want to get into story. And when all of my column 2s are done, when I'm done all of that, I then go and get into column 3. And I take from this list what is affected. Was it my self-esteem? Was it my ambition? Was it my security, either physical security, emotional security, financial security? Did it affect my personal relations or sex relations? And if it affected, I write it down. If it didn't, I don't. And that becomes my 3rd column. And so this is the list as we have it. We've done one column at a time. And you'll notice, hey, there's a big column there at the bottom that we've got to have a look at. So this is what we have done so far. And this holds the key to the future. With this, we are going to unlock our future, unlock this new way of life, unlock freedom. That is what begins to be opened. So it says, we were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle, and that's what we're doing and going to do with the prayers in the 4th column, that entirely different angle. We're going to take a whole 180 on this thing, not a 360, because then we're exactly where we started. That's too much rotation, so a 180. It says, we began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. And we see that, how we were dominated by the people, by the institutions, by the principles. We felt dominated. It goes on to say, in that state, the wrongdoings of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. And as we go through this process, what we are going to find is that 99% of our resentments are fancied. And bear with me, we'll see this. 99% of our resentments, I did it. I caused it to happen. I created it. It's on me. But there are going to be some resentments that are real, that we were really hurt, that we didn't set the ball rolling. And what I'm talking about, very specifically, is things like childhood abuse. Childhood physical, emotional, sexual abuse, that sort of thing. That is what I'm talking about. And as we get into our 4th column, we're going to have a deep look at what were our mistakes. And as I talk about it, those of us who are, almost all of us, who've had experience of any form of that type of abuse will feel our hackles sort of raise and be like, whoa, 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 what do you mean, like my mistakes? And so I want to preemptive this by saying, when we get to the 4th column, with that sort of and that type of abuse, what we do is we take a different lens. So for most of our resentments, we're going to look at what happened before the resentment that put me in a position to have that resentment. Not the case with childhood abuse. There was nothing we did to put us in that position. Nothing like that. With childhood abuse, what we're going to look at is after. What did I do after? And what I mean by that is, did I avoid seeking help for it as an adult? Did I use it as a reason to continue to drink? Did I use it as a reason to continue to harm others? Did I re-victimize myself with that behavior? Because that's a common pattern. That's where we're looking with that sort of thing. But regardless of whether the resentment was fancied, like the parking authority keeps giving me tickets and I'm an innocent victim. Stop parking illegally. That like, what? How dare the speed camera get me again? I'm a victim. No, you're just not going the speed limit. So those are fancied. Or whether it is real, whether it is abuse that we didn't deserve. Nobody deserves abuse. We still need to be free. We still need to be free. So there is going to be a course of action that we take before we get into our fourth column. And that's going to help us to get that freedom. And freedom is real, and freedom exists, and freedom is possible. And here's why we need to be free, is because these wrongdoings had the power to kill, whether it be the traffic camera or whether it be childhood abuse. It still has the power to kill, and I need to live and be free and to be happy. So it says, how could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered. I need to overcome. I need freedom from. But how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. And what we're at is a very interesting place in the book. We're at the precipice of another surrender. What I mean by this is I talk about a reasonable amount, not as much as I talk about other things like being behind a dumpster or wearing grippy socks. Those I talk about a lot more, unfortunately. But what I'm referring to is what I have found, my lived experience with these 12 steps, is they are ultimately a surrender of more and more of myself to the unconditional love that is God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe. That's what they are. Now, I don't know that when I'm at this point of my first ever fourth step. I'm not thinking, oh boy, I'm going to surrender myself to God. And in fact, the word surrender isn't even found in the first 164 pages. But what happens is I come and I come to the end of myself. And I do that again and again and again. And this is another end of myself. I see the reality of who I am. I see the reality of these resentments, and I see the desperate need with which I have to be free of them. But I know that I am in and of myself am not able to do it. And so this is another part of myself that I am giving to the unconditional love that is God. And again, at this point, I don't necessarily think that. In fact, maybe I've got that God word on my resentments list, and I don't know that's what's going to happen. What I need you to hold on to is that begins to be our experience as we get to that fourth column. So it says this was our course. This is how we begin to get freedom. And this is where the solution lies. This is so powerful. It says, this was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. That perhaps the people that we resent, perhaps the institution, perhaps the ideas that we are frustrated by that have harmed us, perhaps that they are operating from pain. It goes on to say, though we did not like their symptoms are column 2 in my resentments. They did this and this and this and this. That's their symptoms, and we didn't like those. And the way these disturbed us, how it disturbed us, was column 3. Oh, it affected my self-esteem, my ambition, my personal, like boop-a-doop-a-doo. That's the way it affected us. It says, they, like ourselves, were sick too. The same thing that is fueling me is fueling them, with alcoholic or not. And we're going to come back to they like ourselves were sick too. Now we're going to use that as the first prompt in our fourth column. And I'll come back to it and I'll explain it. But what is driving me? Ultimately, what is driving me is a conscious sense. It is but a sense of separateness from God. I don't know what that's what that is when I get here. But what it looks like is I am sober and my skin doesn't fit. I'm sober and I'm so depressed I don't want to get out of bed. I'm sober and I'm so anxious it feels like somebody's stabbing my shoulder blades. I'm sober and it feels like there's a hole in the depth of my soul that nothing can fill. And deep within that there is screaming that is coming. And it's like I'm a raw exposed nerve ending, and for some ungodly reason the wind is blowing, and that is how I feel sober. That's not limited to alcoholics. But that is a symptom of that sense of disconnect from God. I say a sense because I can never really be disconnected from God. And what's interesting is when we talk about the alcoholic cycle in the doctor's opinion, it talks about, what am I after? I'm after that sense of ease and comfort that comes at once from a few drinks. I will sell my soul for a sense. And what is driving me is this sense of disconnection. And that is pain. Ultimately, that's pain. I'm being driven by pain, and that pain leads me to operate and think from pain, which is self-centeredness, and then act from pain, which is selfishness. And that creates more and more pain. And so it's saying, hey, is it not possible that the people who have hurt me were also hurting people? The people who have hurt me, or is it not possible that they're afraid the way that I'm afraid? Is it not possible? And then it says we asked. And any time in this book it says we ask, that is a prayer. And so what we're getting into is the resentment prayer. It's also known as the sick man prayer. Sometimes I just call it the page 67 prayer, so it is super clear what prayer I'm talking about. Sometimes I'm a little literal. I know, shocking for somebody that can pull up a random fact about Ashtabula before the meeting starts. You know what I'm saying? That's how my brain goes. But it says, we ask God. So anytime it says we ask, that is a prayer. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. And this is the first part of the prayer. Yeah, Eileen's got it. It's the 3.5 prayer. That's what we're talking about. That's what I call it. Yeah, I also call it that because we're going to pray it before we get into that fourth column. So it's like we got 4 columns, but there's a 3.5 I got to do before I get into column 4. I call it a whole bunch of things because I'm a hoot. But when it says we ask God to help us show them the same pity, patience, and tolerance that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. What we're doing is that idea of like, I'm going to see them as a sick person. And I'm going to ask that this power help me to show them tolerance, to show them pity. Now that word pity in 2025, nope, it's 2026. That's a good sign. I don't know. Where am I? Who am I? I'm sundowning. It's not good. It's been rough lately. I've not been feeling well. But this idea that this pity, patience, and tolerance, the word pity in 2026, it's a word that I don't want your pity. But what we're talking about, like a 1935 pity, is that compassion, that empathy. That's what we're talking about. We're asking that God help us to show them that tolerance, that compassion, that empathy, that patience, that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. And it says, when a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. And again, the word sick, again, some of us might have negative connotations, like sick means bad. Or for those that had some 90s slang, yeah, this is a cool guy with his rollerblades and his Walkman. Yeah, he's sick. That's not what we mean either. But this is, when we talk about sick, we're talking about pain. This is a human being who is living in and operating in pain. This is a sick man. And here it is. How can I be helpful to him? How can I be helpful to him? This is a radical prayer, This is absolutely a radical prayer, a radical idea. And then it says, God, save me from being angry because I can't overcome that anger on my own. It doesn't work. Anytime I try to overcome anger on my own, I just get myself, I know you guys are much more well-adjusted, but I get myself stuck in a narrative loop. And I'm telling myself the same story, that they're the jerk, and it's fine, and I'm not really bothered by it at all anymore, and it's fine, and that person's a smelly jerk. It's very healthy in between the ears when I'm disconnected. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. And what's incredible about this prayer is that this prayer is not actually me praying for them. Sometimes we hear, oh, you got to pray for them. I'm actually not praying for the other person. I am praying that I get changed. I am praying that God's tolerance, pity, and patience flow through me so that I can show that to the other person. I'm praying that I can be helpful to this person. I'm praying that my anger get removed from me. I'm not praying for the other person. I'm praying that I be changed. So how does this prayer work? So this is how I say this prayer. God, help me to show, let's say, Joe. I'm like, I want to have a quick look. Do we have any Joes? I really hope we don't have any Joes. You know what? Bill Wilson. I'll pick Bill Wilson because he's not here, and I have a feeling he was doing his own inventory and he could take it. So, God, please help me to show Bill Wilson the same pity, patience, and tolerance that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Bill Wilson is a sick person. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. That's how we can say that prayer. Now, what if it's an institution? Well, for those of us in North America, we got tax season around the corner. I don't know what's happening in the UK, so I'll just pick the IRS. God, please help me to show the IRS the same pity, patience, and tolerance that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. The IRS is a sick institution. How can I be helpful to it? God, save me from being angry. Thy will, not mine, be done. Now, bless you. What about a principal? Let's say I resent the fact that I have to write inventory. God, please help me to show inventory the same pity, patience, and tolerance that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Inventory feels like a sick thing to do, or inventory feels sick. How can I be helpful to it? God, save me from being angry. Thy will, not mine, be done. Let's say it's something like how I'm resentful that I have to be honest. So it says, God, help me to show honesty, the same pity, patience, and tolerance that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Honesty is a sick ideal. How can I be helpful to it? God, save me from being angry. Thy will, not mine, be done. So that's how we can rock and roll with this prayer. And so before I write on any column 4s, I am going to say this prayer. So I say this prayer and I write on column 4. I say this prayer and I write on column 4. That's, one resentment at a time. But here's my experience. My experience is that there are some resentments that are a little stickier. There are some resentments that need a little bit more of that spiritual elbow grease. And so with those, there's some things we can do. So one of the things, and I'll reiterate this as we get into the 4th column, but when I do resentments, I don't start at the front of the book, because the front of the book is going to have most of those heavy hitters, most of the people that need some of that spiritual elbow grease. So what I recommend, Lynn knows what's coming, 552. So if you're writing your book, page 552, we're going to pop over there. Be ahead of the curve. Look at you, speedy little people, hustling, you're bustling. That's where we're going. And Rob's on it too. Go team. But I like to start at the back of the book, because the back of the book is usually, the jerks in traffic, or, the person at the meeting who talks too long page, like that. Hey, group conscious, they told me to do this. I was asked, I didn't decide. But it's usually those easier ones. weekends. And so that gives me some time to utilize some of that spiritual elbow grease. It gives me some of that time to practice getting into that fourth column. So I always recommend when it comes to the fourth column, start at the back of the book. You'll have one or two heavy hitters near the back, but by and large, it's just going to be the easier ones. So let's pop over to page 552. And so page 552, it's the story of a woman who had this terrible resentment towards her mother. And she knew that if she did not get free of that resentment, she was going to drink again, but she didn't know how to get free of it. And then she was dropping off some magazines. And on one of the magazines, she saw the word resentment and was like, girl, I got one of those. Now, Rob can correct me. I always like to joke. I don't stand much, but I do stand to be corrected. What I have heard is that it was a Liberty magazine article that was written by Norman Vincent Peale. That's what I've heard. So give it a Google. And if I'm wrong, hey, you just went down a history rabbit hole and had some fun learning something. So win-win-win. And so 552, first full paragraph. Here's what the article was essentially saying. It says, if you have a resentment you want to be free of, if you will pray for the person or the thing that you resent, you will be free. You can highlight that, underline. You will be free. If you will ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free. Now that's a direction. So what do I want for myself? What do I want? And it doesn't matter whether it's I want peace and serenity or a new Lamborghini. That doesn't matter. What do I want for myself? And then I say, God, I pray that you would get the big stupid jerk at work a new Lamborghini and peace and serenity. And then it says, ask for their health, their prosperity, and their happiness, and you will be free. We're getting free. That's what we're doing. And this is how we know that this prayer is meant for people like us. It goes on to say, even when you don't want it for them and your prayers are only words, we can imagine, well, I don't want it for them and my prayers are only words. It's like, great, do it anyway. That's my sponsorship, is that's okay, do it anywhere. Anyway, where it's like, go ahead and do it anyway. Doesn't matter if you're not doing it for the right reasons. Doesn't matter if you don't mean it. Do it anyway. My motives don't matter hardly at all compared to my actions. My actions are what matters. And I cannot wait until my motives get better. Spoilers, they won't. But if I take action, my motives will change. So it says, go ahead and do it anyway. Do it every day for 2 weeks. That's a fortnight. Every day for 2 weeks. And you will find that you have come to mean it and to want it for them. How do I get to that place? Consistency. And it says, and you will realize that where you used to feel bitterness and resentment and hatred, you now feel compassionate understanding and love. And that can be really helpful for the big heavy hitters. And it goes on to say, it worked for me then, and it has worked for me many times since. And it will work for me every time I am willing to work it. Hey, do I not want the results? Regardless of what I think about the methods, do I not want those results? It works. Sometimes I have to ask first for the willingness, but it too always comes. And that's a little trick. If I am struggling with my willingness, I can always begin by praying for willingness. And wouldn't you know it, you can build momentum off that. But if I sit around and say, I'm not even willing to pray for willingness, there's not much we can do about that. And it goes on to say, sometimes I have to ask first for the willingness, but it too always comes. And because it works for me, it will work for all of us. As another great man says, the only real freedom a human being can ever know is doing what you ought to do because you want to do it. And if you're like, who said that? Chuck Chamberlain. And if you're like, okay, follow-up question, who's that? He was an alcoholic. He wrote a book that was called A New Pair of Glasses, which described his experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is to say what changes is my perception of everything. And so for some of those big heavy hitters, it can be going back to page 67, it can be immensely useful to utilize page 552. One of the other things that we can do is we can utilize different meditative techniques to help build that compassion, to help, clear away some of that grit. And a meditative technique that you might find helpful, this isn't in the book, so don't use it if you don't want to, is it's called a loving kindness meditation, also known as a metta meditation. And it's a process of meditating and sending loving kindness. And one of the things that I've done for anyone that's interested is I combined the directions on page 552 with a metta meditation technique, and I made a guided meditation for that. So if anyone's interested, I'll go find the link for that. It's somewhere. I know where it is, but I'll go find it. And I'll pop it in the chat. And man, there's power in doing this. Another meditative technique that you might be familiar with is known as Ho'oponopono. And the real trick is for Rob to try to figure out how to spell that and toss it. I'm just kidding. You don't have to. I was just making that joke. And if you're like, here's the trick, voice to text, Google will figure it out. But another thing that you can do is you can call it the Hawaiian forgiveness meditation, and Google will figure it out from there. There's also a meditative technique known as Tonglen. These are just some things that if it doesn't resonate, don't utilize. But I remember I had this inventory I was doing, and I wasn't super resentful, but hey, you got the spelling, and it's even got the apostrophe. Rob's on it. I love it. It's great. And I utilized the Ho'oponopono, and I utilized the loving kindness, and I did it for every single person that was on my resentment list. You don't have to do it. I just thought that would be a fun activity because, yep, that's the type of person I am. And it was an incredible experience. But those things can be really helpful for the softening. Another thing where it talks about, this idea of this is a sick person. We can imagine that this person that we are resentful towards is on their deathbed, and that we're the only person that we can, there that we can console, to console them in their last moments of life. And how might I feel about them then? Now, I have some end of life trauma, so I'm not doing that one. That's not gonna work for me, but that can work for you. And I've done that in the past, where that provided like that empathy and that compassion. But so what I did was I swung the other way. So imagine that person that I'm resentful towards as a small child, as a toddler. And we can even imagine them acting the way that they were acting as a toddler. And again, these things that are just to help breed that compassion, that softening that can help us get into that fourth column. So now let's talk about that fourth column. So we say that prayer. Now again, when we get into that fourth column, where we're going to start, I find it so helpful. And if you're sponsoring others and you're working with somebody that has a hard time getting into that fourth column place, what I would recommend is starting at the back of the book, because those are going to be the easiest resentments. It's going to give you time to do some of those softening, some of the softenings as we get towards the front. And it's going to give us the opportunity to get some practice with that fourth column and to pick up some of these patterns, and those can roll right on in and allow us to see what we need to see. So it goes on. It says, we avoid retaliation or argument. And that can be an important, it's like, oh man, I want to tit for tat that. No, we're done doing that. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. We wouldn't be like, you got the flu, you suck. That's not how we're showing up. At least I hope you're not doing that. If so, we need to talk about your bedside manner. It's not great. But it's we wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. And that's like, whoa, what? We destroy our chance of being helpful? Wait, when did I agree that I was going to be helpful. What's this all about? Step 3. That's what we decided in step 3, that I was going to work for this power, that I was going to be of service to God, higher power, the creator, the spirit of the universe, and the people around me. It is a continuation of the decision that I made. And it gives us the reality we cannot be helpful to all people. We can't help everyone, but at least God will show us. And that's so important. It is God that does it. God that changes me. God that transforms my heart. Higher power, the creator, the spirit of the universe. That's like, I can't overcome it on my own. You know how I know? Because I'm carrying around resentments from when I was in kindergarten. You know what I mean? I'm still pissed about that on my own power. And I'm not letting that go. You know, I want to be a healthy person. I don't want to do, but I can't on my own. So it is God that helps me to do it. Again, a coming to the end of myself. And when I do that, that creates this space where God can enter into my life. And it says, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly, tolerant view of each and every one, where I get to see the situation in a whole new way. I talk a lot about how I love the metaphor of God, higher power, the creator, as light. Because light is not simply what I see. Light is also the way in which I see. And what I mean by that is I got a room to my right. There's no windows. The lights are off. And that room is in darkness. But if I go around the corner, turn on the light switch, everything in that room has changed, and yet nothing has changed. And that's what we get to experience when we dive into this 4th column, where everything in our life has changed. And nothing has changed. We write this inventory. Who you here had where your childhood got better? Childhood didn't change. Family got better. Family didn't change. Those FedEx trucks on the road, they started to drive better, right, Brian? They didn't change. I was joking with Eileen. I'm like, I think so many of us are wearing the brown hoodies because we just wanted to match Brian. We were coordinating for that. But those things didn't change. We changed. And how we see them changed. So it goes on to say, referring to our list again. So we go back to the list. It says, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done. So we're not focusing on what they did. We're going to look for what we did. We resolutely look for our own mistakes. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to pop in and we're going to see this 4th column. And so where we're going to start, when we say the prayer, the page 67 prayer, and then what we do is we come to, the first prompt is, have I done those things? And I'm going to give you the cheat sheet, which is the answer is always yes. The answer is always yes, I have done these things. So I take what I put in column 2 and I ask myself, have I done that? So I'm mad that so-and-so stole from me. Well, have I ever stolen? Have I ever, and I'll be honest, I'm not a shoplifter, but I'll tell you, I've stolen peace of mind. I've stolen, night's sleep from the people that love me. So the answer is always yes. I just need to narrow or broaden the scope so that I'm able to see the truth. And this is a really helpful prompt to start with. And I picked it up during COVID when I traveled virtually to Ontario. So you can essentially blame Rob and Chris on this because they're from Ontario. But it's really helpful in creating that softening where it's like, I am resentful that somebody would do this, but it is the exact same thing that I have done. And not only that, a lot of times I find, hey, not only have I done that, I did it to that person. And not only did I do it to that person, I did it first. So have I done these things? That is the perfect place to start. So on that resentment, I start with yes, and I find out where I've done those things. Either narrowing the scope, yes, I did it to them, and I did it to them first, or broadening the scope, where it's like, for example, let's say the IRS, where the IRS, it just takes people's money. I don't know. It's bureaucratic, for example. I don't know. So have I ever taken money from people? Have I ever taken resources from people? Have I ever been bureaucratic? What I mean by that, did I create a whole set of rules that I expected people to follow? that were confusing and difficult, and like, have I ever done that for people? And we were like, oh yeah, I have. Now, when we're resolutely looking for our own mistakes, once we get that down, what we want to look at is then, where did I make a decision based on self which later put me in a position to be hurt? And where this prompt comes from is it actually in step 3 on page 62, the first full paragraph. The first full paragraph that says selfishness, self-centeredness. Now at the near the end of that paragraph, it says, sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably, which means almost always, find that at some time in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So where did I make a decision based on self, which put me in a position to have this resentment in the first place? Now, where I like to go with this, one of my favorite places to go, is back on page 65. So if you were rocking and rolling with us last week, you'd be like, oh yeah, we skipped over page 65. So on page 65, what we have is this example of the first 3 columns. Now, normally how I would recommend working it is back to front. So my wife, my employer, Miss Jones, Mr. Brown. But let's start with Mr. Brown just for simplicity's sake. So we're resentful at Mr. Brown. And here's why. His attention to my wife, he told my wife of my mistress, and Brown may get my job at the office. So what we're going to do is we're going to say the prayer. God, help me to show Mr. Brown the same pity, patience, and tolerance that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Mr. Brown is a sick person. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will, not mine, be done. And then when we look at, we'll ask ourselves, have we done these things? Like, have we given attention to other people's wives? Have we gossiped about other people? Have we, tried to, do office politics and get ahead at work? Have we ever done that? But what we'll focus on is where did I make a decision based on self? Now, when we look at this, can we see by chance where I might have made a selfish or self-centered decision that put me in a position to have a resentment towards Mr. Brown? For example, if I don't have a mistress, he doesn't have anything to tell my wife. And just in case you're wondering, having a mistress is a selfish and self-centered thing to do. Now, when we talk about that, I'm going to point something out. I'm an alcoholic. I don't have one mistress. I have 2. So I have the mistress that is the affair, but I have the mistress that is alcohol. I have the mistress that is my alcoholism. And I'm not giving my wife any time or care and attention. And that is primarily going to the mistress that is my alcoholism. And is it safe to say if I was giving my wife any care and attention, that maybe there's no room for Mr. Brown to come and shovel his way on in? And then when it talks about Brown may get my job at the office, where did I make a decision based on self, which later put me in a position to be hurt? Well, we're going to talk about this as we go through the inventory. But guess what? I'm not being a good employee. And if I'm being the employee that I'm supposed to be, I won't be in that position. So let's keep going. Miss Jones, Miss Jones, she's a nut. She snubbed me. Can you believe it? She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking, and he's my friend, and she's a gossip. So let's say the prayer. God, help me to show Miss Jones the same pity, patience, and tolerance that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Miss Jones is a sick person. How can I be helpful to her? God, save me from being angry. Thy will, not mine, be done. Well, first and foremost, why might I be worried that Miss Jones is a gossip? Maybe because I'm doing things that she has to gossip about. The mistress. That's one. Like, if I don't have a mistress, is it possible that she doesn't have any tea to spill on me? You know what I'm saying? And then when it talks about that she snubbed me, what a nut. She snubbed me. Can you believe it? She snubbed me. Not that there's any selfishness and self-centeredness and self-importance there, but she snubbed me. Why might she snub me? Well, for one, I'm hanging out with her husband, and I have a mistress. Is it possible that she might not be jazzed that I'm the best influence on her husband? And how I like to visualize this situation is I'm hanging out with her husband, and her husband's alcoholism is ravaging her household and her family. And I just imagine that we're hanging out. This is maybe a Canadian, but also a Midwestern thing, drinking in the garage. Often there's a fridge just for beer in the garage, and we're hanging out in the garage, and we're not helping with the house. We're not helping with the kids. You know, we're keeping them up late. We're breaking things. And of course she's going to snub me. And more than that, I'm like, he's my friend. He's my drinking buddy. But I don't actually care about him because his alcoholism is so serious that his wife had to have him committed. And I can't think about the effect that that would have on him or his family. And all I can think about is me. And I'm missing my drinking buddy. And then we'll do the employer. So my employer, unreasonable, unjust, overbearing, threatens to fire me for padding my expense account, which... By the way, if you're wondering, because I am not clearly a white collar person, clearly, and what's an expense account that you're padding? If you're wondering, that is just theft. I'm stealing from the company. That's what I'm doing. So I say the prayer, God help me to show my employer the same pity, patience, and tolerance that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. How can I be helpful to them? God save me from being angry, thy will not mine be done. And when we talk about this employer, well, I am stealing from the company, and I don't know what type of employees you were, but I'll let you know about my employment history. I would show up sometimes I would be there, and even sometimes I would be sober. And every once in a while, I wouldn't be hungover. Now, I know you guys can't relate to that, but I would also show up with a sense of entitlement, like, you couldn't do this thing without me, as I'm like hungover and operating heavy machinery, which, if you're wondering, is not safe. And so we're seeing how I'm making these decisions that are causing this resentment. Now, we'll wrap up with my wife. So my wife, she misunderstands and nags. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering what nagging is, it's just her asking me to do something followed by me not listening and doing it, and then her having to bring it up again. That's what nagging is. But can you believe it? She's a nag. And she likes Brown, and Mr. Brown, I mentioned this, I have that mug that my mom had, that I gave to my mom, where it says, Mr. Brown needs to get his ass kicked. Oh, Mr. Brown. So likes Brown, wants house put in her name. Oh, unbelievable. So we say the prayer, and I'm aware of the time, don't you worry. God, help me to show my wife the same pity, patience, and tolerance that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. My wife is a sick person. How can I be helpful to her? God save me from being angry. Thy will, not mine, be done. And again, when I look at where did I make a decision based on self, which later put us in a position to be hurt, what we're going to look at is I have two mistresses. I have the mistress that is my mistress, and I have the mistress that is my alcoholism, and I'm not giving her any time, care, and attention. And also, this is the 1930s. She might not even be able to work out of the house, have her own bank account, provide for herself. And in the concept of this marriage, I made certain vows that I would take care of her. And I'm about to lose my job because of drinking and leave her destitute. Her wanting the house in her name would not happen if I was honoring the vows that I had made. And that's where we see decisions based on self. Now, back to page 67, and that's where we're going to leave it because I'm aware of the time. Next week, we're going to wrap up that fourth column and get a lens into where had I been, not had I been, but where had I been selfish, where had I been dishonest, where had I been self-seeking, and where I had been afraid. And we'll wrap up resentments and dive on into fears. So with that, I will toss it over to you, Peppa. Thank you.